This is Governor Bobber. I like good day, doctors.
George Allen here. Good day, doctors.
Hey, this is Governor Chris Christie from New Jersey. Good day, doctors.
Go! You're watching Dr. Politics.
All right. Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Politics and Political Architect Show. I am not Dwight Patel, and but Dwight is enjoying himself somewhere in sunny Florida, or at least I think Florida is sunny at this time of the year, and probably definitely a lot warmer than it is here. And I'm joined by David Shepard, who is one of our frequent doctors. So welcome, David.
I'm kind of a doctor like Joe Biden is a doctor.
That's right. There's stuff I've been meaning to ask you for a long time. There's going to be some fluffy stuff before we get to the stories of the year anyway. Because here's the thing, is that I don't actually know you all that well. So it's like, do you prefer David or Dave, or
David's fine. I always my thing against Dave was I would think of Dave Letterman. So I don't want to be a Dave. I always wanted to be a Davy, but Davy never took. Davy doesn't.
I mean, like Davy Johnson, right?
Or Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then you're from the area, right? You more or less born and raised in Virginia.
Yeah, grew up in Fairfax County. I used to say one of the few, but more and more I'm meeting people that have also grew up in Fairfax County. So it used to be very transient, but with so many people here, so many people grew up here. So, and then involved in politics. Our paths crossed many times, although I don't know that we ever really knew each other. But I was at Leadership Institute for a time when you were with Accuracy and Media. And of course, I remember your father. And I remember seeing him at CPACs and different events. And your father, you may remember the joke, but your father had a joke. It was self-deprecating on him. I don't totally remember the joke, but it had something to do with when he had to buy a new suit. And he was making fun of, I guess, if he had a sort of reputation of being tight with money or something. And so he told some funny joke about having to finally buy a new suit. It was self-deprecating, but it was very nice. It got a good laugh. So I've always been involved in politics. And then, of course, my writing, my Substacks, my books. And now you and Dwight got me into podcasting, because I'd never really done a podcast, and we were talking before the show. I wouldn't even know how to set one up. So it's something I need to learn to do. But I'm now watching more and more podcasts. The most famous, of course, being Ben Shapiro's, and you have Rogan. I must confess, I never saw a Joe Rogan podcast, but it's very popular. He's got a huge following. And even on the left, you have they have their own podcasts. I forgot the one with the Obama speechwriters, the three of them getting together and they do their podcasts. So
is that Pod Save America? Or?
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's the one.
I know Axelrod, I think, is involved with Pod Save America, but I don't listen to the stuff on the left.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and this election has shown how important that is, that people are turning now to these podcasts. I think fewer and fewer people are watching legacy media. I think they finished themselves off with the Trump derangement syndrome. I think they're mostly done. So what a good podcast is, now ours, of course, but also I don't know if you ever see Mark Halperin has a podcast, Two Way, and it's very good. He's got Sean Spicer on, and then a Democrat, and so I will watch his stuff. But he will break some stories. There's good reporting on that as well. So
Yeah, Halpern is interesting, I'll say, just because I mean I know he's a frequent guest on Megyn Kelly's podcast,
yeah,
the on YouTube, and I'm thinking like, what happened to Mark Halpern? He found
yeah,
religion.
yeah. He got kind of conservative. He was involved in some sort of scandal. I don't know that much about it. Maybe it was a Me Too type thing, but he's come back and he's doing well with his podcast. I know,
Yeah,
and he comes across as fairly sane politically.
yeah, he does. No, he does. But I think that's what the attraction is for Megyn Kelly too. There is just that here's a guy who had really been known as more of a liberal journalist, but now he is much more towards that conservative arena. He has criticized the liberals heavily, so it's interesting to see they do change. They do see the light at times, right?
Yeah, and I think Obama and Biden, I think has made a lot of people see the light. You're looking at there was a every day last couple days I've heard of former DNC people who've now become Republicans who've left. There's a lady the other day, I think two recently in the news that apparently were so turned off by.
Yeah, there was
Biden.
that big the big fundraiser, right? The lady, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah. She's just she said, forget it. The Democrats, forget it. I mean, you've just kind of thrown me
Yeah.
under the bus here, and I'm done with it and everything.
But when I was a kid and you were a kid, things definitely there was another realignment. Carter was so bad that you had a lot of people become Republicans or at least leave the Democrat Party. And my parents are good examples of Reagan Democrats. I mean, after Carter, my father, who passed away just a couple of years ago, he never voted for another Democrat again after Carter. That was it for him. So I think that's the case with Biden, and Biden's approval rating is at what 38% now. I think I saw. So and you saw with young people moving to Trump. So you wonder if Biden's going to be similar. I don't think he's that negative as Carter was, at least on the party, but pretty bad. So Democrats may have trouble living him down. And my next column I want to think about, and you may have some ideas, is if you look at the Biden legacy and think about that, what is he going to really be remembered for? I think Afghanistan. I don't know what you think. I think Afghanistan. I think the border, the mishandling of the economy, and I think he did that with the American Rescue Act. The economy was reopening. We had the vaccine. I think that was the big key mistake at the beginning when he wanted to spend over $1 trillion on the American Rescue Act. It was going to be inflationary. You didn't need it. You're opening the economy anyway. So I thought that was the big mistake at the beginning, and that's what got you the higher inflation, or at least
Yeah,
made it worse.
no, I
That's
think
my
that's right.
thought.
I mean, and your comments about Carter, I think, are spot on. I mean, Carter's presidency, was so bad. I mean, it really did pave the way for the Reagan Revolution.
Yeah.
It just set up Reagan perfectly for his 2 terms in office. The enthusiasm that Reagan got from the young people at the time. So I mean, we're talking 1980. So I was a young kid. You're younger than I am, so you were even younger. But it's just I remember, very vividly, you know, uh, I was finishing up college. Uh, just the enthusiasm from the college Republicans. College Republicans kind of, they ebb and they flow. It
Yeah.
depends. They have their ups and downs over the years. And during the Reagan years, it just took off like crazy because every young person almost, it seemed, wanted to be a Reagan Republican. They wanted to be a college Republican. They wanted to support Ronald Reagan at
Yeah.
the time. His optimism, all of the things, that he was doing. And you're coming off of the Carter malaise kind of a thing like this. it was just perfect. No administration is perfect, and Reagan had, they took some pot shots at some things. They had suffered some issues, but by and large, I think people remember, Reagan fondly. I mean, definitely the Republican Party has been trying to find the next Reagan, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, I don't know, they'll be looking to find, the next Trump. That's why you have a JD Vance, is that they're
Mhm.
setting Vance up to continue the Trumpism that has been going on. And as you said, the young people that have gravitated towards Trump, it's because of Joe Rogan and others. My wife and I were out today, and she has gotten ridiculously hooked on some YouTube stuff, and she's convinced that it's people like Rogan or Jake Paul, and that Barron Trump getting his dad to go on these youth-oriented, younger audience-oriented podcasts
Yeah.
was a huge thing. It put Trump there. Trump, you never know what he's going to do, right? Nobody ever knows what he's going to do, but they worked this out and they loved him. You know, he got the crypto bros all behind him.
Yeah.
He moved Silicon Valley towards him. A lot of the Silicon Valley left wingers, liberals, moved towards Trump because they saw what they got under Biden was not
Yeah.
favorable to their industry. So lots of things happened. Yeah, Biden's legacy. What's funny when you were talking about the Biden legacy,
Mm.
the White House is spending a lot of time sending out tweets like, Joe Biden's legacy is, this, bringing
Yeah.
back the economy. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? It's like, who are you trying to convince? Okay, maybe the Democrats are going, yeah, that's it. But any educated person, right-minded fellow is going to say like, no,
Yeah.
that's not true.
Well, and the thing is, if he had just left things alone, as we opened up and you got the vaccine, or what we call a vaccine, the economy would have taken off. He didn't need all that spending, and he did all that spending, which I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think that again was what got us the high inflation, because there wasn't any need for all that spending, and
Right.
the economy should have been booming. And the fact that, let's say it was good, at least in some measure, but it was not near as good as it really should have been when you start bringing people back to work. That should have been a heck of a lot better. So it was his mismanagement there, and but we said before the show he's off on another vacation. Why is he having vacations? I don't get it. What has he done to get a vacation? It's the weirdest thing. I guess it's because taxpayers are going to be paying for it, so he can go to Hawaii or whatever. It's on the taxpayer dime. Why not? But I think he's probably the most corrupt president I can think of that we've had in my time, in terms of setting up his family for business, um, in terms of working 4 days a week, 10 to 12, 10 to 6, or 10 to 4, and collecting a full check. So it just it's just sort of sponging, if not outright corruption. You're just talking about sponging off the taxpayer, which I think is what he's done all his life.
Yeah, I mean, we see you know, we see after the Wall Street Journal did that report last week about
Yeah,
Biden, just only, confirming what the rest of us knew about his mental acuity, his diminished state, and how the White House worked very hard to protect him, right? And
yeah,
not let the public really know, how much deterioration Biden had. So,
yeah,
here we were being deceived all this way. I think you and me and Dwight and others that we know, I mean, we knew we could see this front and center. Every time you put Biden in front of a camera, there was problems. He was getting lost.
yeah,
He stumbled. He didn't know which way to exit the stage.
yeah,
The debate which really ended his candidacy was just kind of capping everything off, saying like just confirming what we all knew about Biden's abilities to continue on. and everything. So yeah, like we were talking also before the show, I don't recall in my lifetime and watching politics really from a very young age. So I mean, I can go back to the 1968, time with when Nixon was elected. I remember watching the elections. I remember I wasn't campaigning for a Republican at that time when I was all of 9 years old, but my father
Yeah.
always he had me involved in local school board stuff, handing out leaflets all the time and
Yeah.
being at a polling place at the age of 9, handing out this stuff,
No,
and
that's
we had a local congressman who'd been there, who was in Congress for a long time, Gil Goody, and he actually stopped by the polling place. I remember one year, it's like I'm thinking like, wow, congressman. He's like, I'm all of like 9 or 10 years old. It was pretty exciting for me,
yeah.
to think about that. But so, in essence, I've been watching politics for 56 years, in that sense. And I don't recall any time when we've had a transition from one party to another for presidency to
Yeah.
see a president of the United States basically abdicate the presidency to the incoming president this early. I mean, there's always going to be that, they have to turn over power. They're going to be meeting, talking about transition. They have transition teams and things like this. But Trump has dominated this agenda, right? I mean, he has set the pace, set the tone. It's a kind of just like the pre-presidential. It's all pre-inaugural stuff. And then he's just going to be able to he's already been the president once, but he'll be able to swoop into office. And Joe Biden shows a lot of disinterest, overall in the office, except for using the power of the presidency to do a few other last minute things and then just
Yeah.
say goodbye. For which I'm sure Dr. Jill is just furious that the way this whole thing has turned out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's probably one of the unhappiest people in America at this point in time. That
You know, I think she was the one that probably tried. I don't know how anyone could convince him to run again when he knew shortly after taking office, according to the Wall Street Journal, that he had problems. But he still
Yeah.
thought he could run again. I think that seems to me is kind of odd. That's a guy who's out of it. He doesn't understand that. I mean, he's got to know that the presidency is a full-time job, and he's doing 10 to 4. So wouldn't he think maybe I'm not up for this? But I think it was Jill, and again, I don't know them, pure guess, but I think it was her that kept trying to keep him into the race. That's just my guess. And
And
I
I
think
know
she
I know
might.
lots of other people have said this, but my thought too is that this is as close to a weekend at Bernie situation as
Yeah,
I've ever come across in
yeah,
politics. It's like, except that Biden is technically alive.
yeah. That's right. No, he is, but it's just it is odd in so many ways that he's like you said, he's basically it's like a quiet quitting, I guess. He feels
Yeah.
well that all the foreign leaders talking to Trump anyway, and I think he's doing what he can to. I wrote a column about this earlier in the week that for all the talk about a peaceful transfer of power and the belief in democracy, he's taking steps to undermine Trump in terms of trying to sell off materials for the wall, telling Ukraine, yeah, you can shoot missiles deep into Russia. Um, the student loan stuff, trying to come up with an order to extend teleworking. I mean, the pandemic ended 4 years ago, but I don't know why we're still in the teleworking mode. But it just seemed to me, as I pointed out in the column, that for all this talk about a peaceful transfer, he's making it a lot more difficult for Trump once he gets in office. This
Well,
whole
yeah,
notion of Trumpers.
as I think people have said, you know, the one thing that they are doing is trying to basically kind of Trump proof a lot of
Yeah,
things as much as they can. This is, I mean, they've only got a little bit of time left to try to put some actions through to
yeah,
try to make Trump's life a little more difficult. And there's some things that that cannot be reversed, and that'll happen, and they've done that. But going forward, I mean, as you mentioned, like student loans, the
yeah,
forgiveness,
yeah,
you're not gonna see this, these shenanigans under the Trump administration,
yeah.
because the Biden administration has done an end run around the courts on student loan forgiveness,
Yeah.
and they just they just keep chipping away, saying here's a tranche of loans. We're going to forgive this. We're going to forgive this. Because the court had already ruled that they couldn't do this the way they had set it up, and so they found like little loopholes and say, well, we can't if we can't do the whole 400 billion or whatever it is, we will do them in smaller amounts.
Yeah.
But you and me, and your family, my family, whatever, any taxpayer, we're all paying for that.
Yeah.
They always, they always, these programs was like, oh, it's not going to cost, we're going to forgive this. How wonderful. Not cost. It's like, it's going to cost me money in essence, or it's going to cost my grandkids money. I mean, probably, that it's just adding to this astronomical debt load that we have that at some point in time is going to really come home to roost. And we've seen this, we've seen our debt just skyrocket. And think about this too, David. Remember at the early Biden years, he was bragging about how they got the deficit, the annual deficit under control. It was low, and they were comparing their early year deficit to Trump's deficit, where he'd had a lot of the pandemic spending and a lot of other things going on there, which was just a distortion of everything that was going on there. But then as the deficit grew, it was like crickets.
Yeah.
If it no longer benefited them to talk about that. It's kind of like during their first part of the campaign. Let's talk about Bidenomics. But that fell flat because people pointed out, it's like, what is Bidenomics? We went through high inflation, because then what did they do? They lied about, they kept saying, we have brought down inflation. Inflation is higher than it was under Trump. And you saw it skyrocket to 40-year highs, things that a lot of people have never seen before in their lifetime. And we now have a new baseline of cost of goods, where we're not going to say. I mean, my wife and I, we're out shopping today, and she wanted a new hair dryer. She wants to have like one at home and one she can use, maybe take on the road. It's something that's a little more portable. I don't know what a hair dryer costs. I don't use a hair dryer, right? And so there's two at Costco. You can buy the $400 Dyson, which is we're not doing that. She's not doing that. And then there was another one called, I think, Baby Bliss Pro. I don't even know what the heck it is. I'm used to things that's saying like Conair or whatever. And it's like, I'm like $60. Okay. Now, when you buy something at Costco, it's generally going to be a good price.
Yeah.
If it's on sale, it's probably even better. But this is a better price. So I'm sure if I look this up on Amazon or whatever, I'm sure this is probably $20 cheaper than I could get it on Amazon in general.
Yeah.
Place else or Target or whatever. But I'm like, $60. I asked my wife. I said, didn't these things used to cost like $20 or $30? And she goes, yeah, that was a few years ago. These are things we're just not going to see go back to the levels that they used to be. We're going to pay higher prices for just about everything for the rest of our lives, and that is part of the Biden legacy. By inflating the economy, by throwing all that money in there, driving the cost of goods up, creating all these issues. I don't care if inflation was 9% and is down to 2.5% or 3% now. It's still at a pace that's higher than when Trump left office. And the cumulative effect over the last 4 years is that, guess what? It's what? I think most goods are 25 or 30% more on the average than they used to be.
Yeah,
we're not going back.
Yeah.
We're not going back. We are now at this level and going to go forward. And so, you may see a deal here and there, but I remember, when I was younger, when we had high inflation, the last time we had, just all that, when interest rates were in the 15% range and stuff like that, the mentality is that buy it today because it's going to cost you more tomorrow.
Yeah.
And when inflation skyrocketed under Biden, I think that was the mentality too. I mean, besides the fact that there were product shortages, it's just like no one knew how long this was going to last. And what if I buy this today at $50, will it be at 55 in 30 days? It could very well be.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of crazy how where we've gone in these last 4 years. So yeah, Afghanistan, immigration, lots of things under the Biden legacy that none of us, either of us, are going to be missing at any point in time.
Yeah.
Uh,
I thought he just, the other thing about him, he just always seemed kind of out of it. He just, he didn't do press conference. I grew up at a time, and you did as well, when presidents would do, I remember evening press conferences, the
yep.
national network press conferences. And Trump did a lot of press conferences. He'd come out to the White House briefing room and take questions himself. But no, Biden stayed in hiding. He ran in hiding, and the excuse was COVID. He got to stay in his basement to campaign, and then started governing not much more open than that, even after the vaccine. So, and I remember, I don't know if I told you this before, but remember early on in the case of Afghanistan, he didn't know what was going on, I don't think. And he would make a statement and then turn and leave, and then all the press would shout questions and he'd walk out. And then once he was, while this was all going on, some reporter did catch him and ask him. Biden started to comment, but he stopped himself and he said, "Oh, I'm not supposed to answer those questions, or I'll get in trouble. I'll get in trouble if I answer this question." To me, I thought the person telling him, "Don't answer those questions," that's the person who's in charge. It's not him. And so I think if we want to find out who was running the country, that would be the person. Whoever told him, "Don't talk about this, don't talk about that." Yeah, that's the person running it, which is probably
Yeah, no,
Obama.
no, they were definitely running a protection racket to keep him from
Yeah,
trying to go too much off the cuff because he couldn't really do it.
yeah,
And which is a shame. I mean, look, we're Americans. We support the office of the president, but and we don't want to see a feeble president. We are a strong country. We want to project strength, and confidence, and Biden was not doing that. I mean, he was an embarrassment. Uh, you know, we see world leaders that that in some countries that they go on forever, dictators and others, and some of them are not. They're just not capable really of governing, but they're propped up, by various things, by the military or whatever. But
yeah.
we're talking about the United States of America, and that should not be happening at all. I mean, and so I think the other part of the Biden legacy too is that the fact that what happened here during the campaign, the fact that he had to pull out so late in the campaign, part of his legacy also is the mess he is leaving behind, where the Democrats are sniping. They're trying to figure out what their direction is going forward. I mean, obviously they're plotting towards the midterms, hoping to regain some momentum going into 2028. And that's always a possibility. Republicans only have a 5-seat majority in the House. They did extend, they did manage to take the Senate, and they've got a decent number of senators in there. But elections are, they're never guaranteed. So you don't know, we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years when more Republicans are going to be up for reelection than Democrats, and then whether or not that gives them a chance to turn the tide back again. We will have to wait and see for the results. And I think this is where the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress, they need to show cause. They need to show the American public why they deserve to stay in power, why Trump needs to have control of Congress and the Senate for his entire 4-year term. If it flips in midterm, then his legislative agenda pretty much dies. So he's got kind of 2 years, to get things done, but we'd like to see him really have chance to do it as much as he can over the next 4. Uh,
Yeah.
and the stuff that Musk is going to recommend or Ramaswamy going to recommend, that's not something that you can even make much of a dent in 2 years, much less 4.
And the other thing is, and I wrote about a column about this as well, is are House Republicans going to engage again in a circular firing squad over Speaker and come up with a silly battle? My argument in that case was it's really Trump's agenda that's going to be advanced, not Mike Johnson's agenda. And so, as long as Johnson is effective and on board with MAGA, there's no reason not to vote for him. There's no reason to start another battle, and you don't know who it's going to be. It's a pointless fight. And I am concerned that the margins are so close that they're going to need Democrat help because you'll have enough of the no caucus causing problems. I hope I'm wrong, but that's one thing that kind of worries me. But
Yeah,
we'll see.
I think without Matt Gaetz in Congress, you have one of the main instigators of all of this, right?
Yeah,
I have no love lost for Matt Gaetz and
no,
what he did to Kevin McCarthy because
yeah,
they didn't have a plan.
yeah,
What you don't go through 15 rounds of voting
mm,
if you have a plan,
yeah,
and so it's kind of like, and they they still, they didn't understand. Some of these people, Republicans, didn't understand. It's like, McCarthy was, maybe he wasn't always the best guy, but
yeah,
here he was a guy who could get things done. He knew how to push votes through. He was pretty good. He was pretty good at his job, and you wind up basically, he wind up basically pushing him out of Congress in the end. I mean, I think he just was like, I don't need to be a part of this, this crazy group anymore, because they didn't have anybody waiting in the wings immediately to succeed him. How many people did they try to go through before they finally settled on Johnson? I mean, Johnson's like the guy, the 25th man or 26th man on your bench in baseball. It's like they were really getting to the end of the line. The guy who's the pinch hitter who plays in one in every 25 games or something like that.
yeah,
You know, he was not front and center. He was definitely a backbencher, and this is how far they went into this, and it didn't do him any good because Johnson was going to face, and we've been seeing this with this last spending battle, is that faces the same problems that McCarthy did. He wasn't going to have any easier time than McCarthy was on getting these spending bills through, and so because Republicans they continue to fight about things. I mean I don't like the CR because it's always just kicking the can down the road. Uh,
yeah,
I do like kind of what it's not perfect, but I think when you have an Elon Musk going out there and saying, here's the bill we should pass probably versus the bill they want to pass,
yeah,
1,500 pages versus like 116 pages. I mean, I think of as a visual, it's a very powerful effect. But this is the way our government runs, is that our spending bills are just loaded up. Why do we have a $6.2 trillion budget? Because we're out of control. We just spend. We've
mm,
lost our way in controlling our spending to even come remotely close to balancing a budget. Can Elon suggest enough cuts that they could actually get through to bring this thing a little bit closer to balance? That is such a heavy lift. No, but I think he's got the power of a pulpit that things can happen out there, that it will change things along the way. And look who's tuned in.
there it is. All right, all right.
Woo! How's the weather, Dwight?
Well, it's probably nice for him. Well,
so so it's difficult. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, and the thing is, if it took them 15 ballots to finally get Johnson, and they don't like Johnson, how many ballots is it going to take to find someone else
Right.
that they think
Right,
might
right,
be
right. I
better?
mean, look, it's like if who else do you have besides Johnson at this point? I mean, who's the next person to step up to
Yeah,
do this that could actually get enough votes
yeah,
to win this thing? I mean, that's why, what was it? Who suggested, Elon Musk, be the speaker, because you don't have to be a member of Congress to be speaker.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's not going to fly. Okay, I mean,
It's not
it's
going to
funny.
happen because he's got all kinds of other things to do. And in fact, I don't know how he does it. How can you run SpaceX, run Tesla, the other things, and look for government ways to? I mean, I think he's a brilliant guy. I think a lot of them, but I have no idea how he how he could do all this.
I think his board of directors also sometimes wonders, like, yeah, so
Yeah.
you've got SpaceX, you've got Tesla, you've got the Boring Company, which is the tunnel company,
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So, and I think, and then also he's doing the Grok AI thing too. So,
Mhm.
he's got all this stuff, hands in the fire. But he has leveraged all of that to immense,
Yeah.
wealth, and
Oh, yeah.
his bet on Trump has been, incredibly profitable to him because
Yeah.
I don't know, I think today the stock closed. It's not as high as it was. It's at its peak, post election, but just before the election, a share of Tesla stock was going for $248 a share. I think today it was like 436, right?
Wow.
And he owns a big chunk of this, right? But I think it had gone to like 460 or 470. So we're talking, 60, 70, 80% increase, in the stock, which means that his wealth was way more than the money that he spent on the Trump campaign. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, wow, okay, you made a calculated bet here and you won big time. This is better than any lottery you could have won,
Yeah.
at this
No,
point in time.
a brilliant guy.
It's amazing what's going on there, and all of that.
And it's a great opportunity to tap his brain, tap his mind to get his advice. I mean, you'd be stupid if you had the opportunity to get his advice on these things and you didn't take it. So,
Right. Well, it's funny too, don't you think that? So who are complaining about? I mean, it's the Elizabeth Warrens, the Chuck Schumers, and a bunch of other liberals. Bernie Sanders. They're all complaining about how Elon Musk has basically bought this last election and whatnot. But
mm,
people are loving it, right?
yeah.
The Doge thing was brilliant. Go
Mm,
ahead and capitalize on this funny, silly, meme, cryptocurrency, and create an agency, and something that has no power except to make recommendations, right? But to capitalize on this whole thing on the crypto side on top of that,
yeah.
he's got people doing it. Look, and he's got people. They have people applying. What do you have to do? He's like, you need. It's like, who's willing to work 80 hours a week for no pay to help us do this? People want to do it. They're willing to do it.
Yeah.
This is amazing. That
Uh,
this is the power of Elon Musk, is that people say, I want to follow Elon Musk, because I believe that we can do something like that. And any kind of cuts that they can achieve that will hold will be well worth it. But it is going to be a very big mountain to climb to do it. But you know, Elon has a way. I mean, the stuff that he tweets and everything like this is that he gets under your skin. He starts doing it. People think about it. He exposes all these crazy things that go on, and it makes people think because he's got such a large following. So he kind of builds up this whole thing with the public, where they weren't really upset about things before. He brings it to their attention, and they're like, yeah, just like I said, just by having the skinny CR versus the CR that they were looking at, I think people are like, a lot of people are saying like, yeah, please explain to me why, we need an extra, 1,500 pages or whatever it is, 1,400 pages, of spending to run this government. I mean, do we need all the federal government employees? We have got a ridiculously large bureaucracy in this country,
yeah.
for which most we don't know what most of them do, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. No,
So,
I agree. And in the private sector, if you're not performing, they fire people all the time. But not the civil service, not the federal government. So if the government is so important, then wouldn't you be firing bad people if it were so important?
yeah,
Um, but the other thing I would say you mentioned is, well, with Elon Musk, I'm trying to think in our lifetime if there's anyone who's comparable. And remember, we had Ross Perot, was the popular sort of billionaire, and T. Boone Pickens. But I don't think they're certainly on the level of an Elon Musk. But those are the
no,
only two I can
There-
think of in my lifetime.
yeah, and I mean it's a different era, right? I mean, you're talking about the '90s, and we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Twitter, we didn't have social media, and that Elon Musk, even though he lost a lot of money buying Twitter, uh, it's turned into a great megaphone for him.
Yeah.
Even if the liberals say, I'm leaving that for Blue Sky or something else or Threads, uh, people still have to go to X or Twitter to see what Elon is saying. Elon kind of is like that old E.F. Hutton commercial, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So you think about that, it's like, yeah, it's when Elon speaks, people do listen.
Yeah, that's true.
They do, and so I think he and Trump are just about a perfect pair. Trump, he has Trump's ear for sure. So
Yeah.
on many things.
Well, Trump is smart to listen to him, but or at least take into consideration what he says, because yeah, he's a brilliant guy and knows a lot about running organizations. So
Okay, so we've got another 20 minutes or so. So I said this, when I kind of messaged you before, is that we want to spend some time on some of the bigger stories of 2024.
yes,
We're not going to go in any particular order. It doesn't have to be like a 1 through 10 or whatever. Give me some of your top stories. What do you think?
well, certainly the election. But if you want me to break it down, I think in Butler, the attempted assassination of Trump, because uh, that was some think Providence, that he turned his head at the right time. The bullet grazes him. Had he not done that, he probably would have been dead. So you're looking at an assassination of a major party political candidate. And that would be the first time, I guess, since RFK 68 or George Wallace in 72. Happened in Maryland, the Free State.
Right. Yeah.
So I would rank that as number one, I think. I don't know if you have a number one, but or if I stole your thunder on number one.
Yeah, I think that's pretty close to. I was debating whether or not it was Trump getting. Well, I guess the fact that there were apparently two assassination attempts probably puts that at
That's
the
true.
top. And then I'd say the election of Donald Trump was a very big story because it was kind of like it was really, to me, a political comeback for a guy
Oh, yeah.
that wasn't considered to be a serious candidate for the presidency early on. But when the Democrats did him the big favor by saying, we want to going to indict him on all these charges in New York and Georgia and whatever, and they just charge him with all these specious, violations of the law, he turned that around to his advantage. Because, you know, I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, Ron DeSantis is probably going to be the guy, but it became very evident, Trump got some momentum, and Ron DeSantis gone, Nikki Haley gone, Tim Scott gone, it just boom, boom, boom. He just knocked them out one by one,
Yeah,
and it just became Trump all over again. Uh, but I think it's a better version of Trump this time around than last time.
absolutely, and much improved. And I'd say on the negative side, one of the big stories, and I say this is negative because in terms of jurisprudence, is the whole alleged fraud, the New York City fraud conviction against Trump. The bank took the money, they gave him the interest rate, he paid them back, they wanted to loan him more money. And somehow, in between all that, New York State says fraud was committed. And they ended up stripping, $400 million out of him. I guess that's still under appeal. But I thought that was a low point, and that's a big news story, I think, because of what they were able to get away with, where it's basically just naked theft.
Yeah,
Um,
before the show too, I decided I went and I just did a very cursory search. I said like 2024 stories of the year,
yeah,
and I went like ABC, and what I noticed was that on several of these news websites, is that they decided to be somewhat non-political, and I
mm,
thought this is interesting because I'm almost wondering whether or not this is a purposeful move on the part of the news media so that they don't have to talk about Trump, right? They're talking about a lot of other stuff, but they don't talk about Trump at all. They just had a lot of other things in there, and I thought, so you know, how do you ignore some of these stories, and then you just say, well, we're basically not going to talk politics. We're just going to talk culture. And so here are the other stories, the airplane door flying off the airplane and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, those are newsworthy events. You could go to Wikipedia and look at what happened during 2024 and see a list of things as well if you want to, some of the more notable stories or whatever that happened during the year. But I'm just like, you ignore a presidential election. You tried to basically bury that. I think once again the media is just abdicating their responsibility. You talked earlier, or was it before the show, about how, I guess we were talking on a podcast about how much the legacy media, they're losing their audience, right?
Yeah.
So it's things like podcasts, it's just videos on YouTube, it's
Mhm.
TikTok. I mean, a lot of people get their news from TikTok, and TikTok has got what are we at? December 27th. They've got about 23 days, unless the Trump administration reverses things. They're supposed to sell their U.S. business or shut down, I guess. So that they're under the gun. That's not a whole lot of time, but
Yeah.
but it's something may be done. I mean, because Trump was pretty anti TikTok before, and now he's been kind of pro TikTok.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really care about TikTok that much at this point, but I know it draws a huge audience. I've never been on TikTok. I've seen a few TikToks,
Well,
but
politics make strange bedfellows, as they say.
they have, and they probably will continue to do so under the Trump administration.
Real quick, I don't know if I ever told you the expression politics, uh, uh, strange bedfellows, politics make strange bedfellows. The origin of the story I heard was Wendell Willkie, when he ran for president in 40, he and his wife were basically estranged. And the advisors thought, we need to keep you guys together, at least in appearances, we're going to need you to travel together, and you're going to need to stay in the same room or something. And that's when Mrs. Willkie remarked that politics make strange bedfellows. So,
Oh, interesting.
but
Yeah.
uh, I think the other thing is, the big news story is just the very fact that Biden dropped out of the race. I
Right.
don't know of another case. You had LBJ, but when LBJ announced he wasn't running, that was before the primaries. That was
Right.
before. Well, actually, no, it was after New
Early.
Hampshire because
Yeah.
Eugene McCarthy did well.
Yeah, but I mean, it was early enough that
Yeah,
the Democrats could go ahead and make a change there. I
yeah,
mean, in essence, they could, it wasn't it wasn't earth shattering. I mean, at that
yeah,
point in time, I mean, by the time Biden got, by the time we got to that debate and he dropped out, it was all over, right? I mean,
yeah,
so I mean, Harris was now then anointed. Nobody voted for her. I mean, this has got to be this probably is the first time, isn't it, as far as we know, at least definitely in our lifetime, where you
yeah,
have a presidential candidate who, a nominee for a major party who nobody voted for,
yeah,
at the
strange.
polls
Yeah,
in a primary.
yeah, that is weird. And she turned out to be a very bad candidate. But so anyway, I think that would have been another news story. Um, the other thing I think in culture, I'm just trying to broaden it out. If I think of some cultural stories, well, of course, we have the drone situation, which we still don't really understand. I think that's an odd story or a big story in the sense we still, I guess, they still don't know exactly what it is, or if the government does know, they're not telling us. That's an odd one. And the other thing is, last night I saw, at the end of the year, they always have a list of the people that died throughout the year,
Right.
the obituaries. I don't know where I saw it. I saw it on TV. And that was sad when I saw a lot of the folks died. For me, the big loss was probably Bob Newhart dying. I love Bob Newhart. And the death of Pete Rose, of all people, the great Pete Rose. I grew up with Pete Rose, kind of. I remember him as a ball player. I remember my father took us to Philadelphia for a business trip, and we went to see the Phillies play, and there was Pete Rose. And I liked him, I must say, because of that hustle that he had, that drive.
Charlie
A lot
Hustle.
of people thought that was a hot dog thing of him to do. But the other thing, you remember what he would do? He wouldn't just roll the ball back to the mound when they got the third out. He'd spike the ball. Remember, he'd spike the ball. And the other thing about him is when he got a base on balls to walk, he would sprint down to first base. I thought that was interesting. So
Well, I mean, that's all emblematic of Charlie Hustle, right? I mean,
yeah,
in that, you know, that kind of iconic but also terrible, how much he played. I mean, baseball All-Star game, what was it, 1970, where he
Yeah,
took out Ray Fosse at the
yeah,
plate,
yeah,
and Ray Fosse was never the same. But
yeah,
nobody plays an All-Star game like that,
yeah. I
you
know.
know?
They looked at, and it's interesting that in a way, I kind of appreciate that Rose wanted to fight hard for every game.
Yeah.
But apparently, they look down on that. That if it's an exhibition game, you're only supposed to give so much, I guess. But so he took heat for that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still in those days, I still think the baseball All-Star game is still maybe the premier All-Star event in pro sports
Yeah,
because I think they do try and play.
yeah,
The NBA All-Star game is a complete joke. They haven't
yeah,
figured it out. They've totally
yeah,
lost their way.
yeah,
The NFL is completely, just bungled their all pro game. They've also tried different formats and they can't do it.
yeah,
NHL's All-Star game, it's okay, but it, the baseball All-Star game, my only complaint about the baseball All-Star game really is that when they went to a policy that every team had to have a representative. I'm like,
yeah,
look, you vote the best players up to that point in the season on the team. I'm
yeah.
okay if some of them decide to opt out because of they want extra time off or whatever. They don't want to risk an injury or whatever. They
Mm.
get to be a named all-star. But
Like Ray
limit,
Fosse.
yeah,
Like
but
Ray
limit
Fosse.
but limit the number of alternates that can actually be substituted for this. You can't have this wholesale thing of like all these players opting out. They
Mm,
either play or you just don't have all the players or whatever. You
mm.
just kind of you such they need to do something a little bit better than that. And I don't think that every team needs an all-star representative. To me, that actually puts sometimes a lesser player on the all-star team on the roster than somebody else who was more deserving because of that rule. But
Yeah,
in general, I still think I love baseball, and
yeah,
I think as the midsummer classic, it's still a great game.
yeah.
It still beats the other professional sports. Yeah. Well, you mentioned baseball. I mean, the other sad loss we had was just recently with Ricky Henderson.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to mention Henderson. Yeah, Henderson was great. He's one of the best leadoff hitters I ever saw.
Amazing player.
Yeah,
Also very kind of a showman, right? The things that he did. But boy,
yeah,
I mean, he showed power,
yeah,
speed,
yeah.
just incredible, amount of talent. I think he still holds the record for most leadoff home runs,
Yeah.
which is
And stolen
hard.
bases, I assume, has he
And
just
on the
stolen
stolen
base?
base record, yeah. Which I mean, after baseball changed the rules about how many times you can throw from the mound, made the bases larger. So we've seen stolen bases come back into vogue a little bit, but they're
Yeah.
not, they're not at the Ricky Henderson where you can steal 100 bases a year level yet. Uh,
Well, the thing about this, I know is an old argument, it's been beaten to death, but I never warmed to interleague play. See, because when I grew up as a kid, the All Star game was special because they never played each other during the season.
exactly. Right. Yeah.
And the World Series was really special because the Mets and the Red Sox never played each other during the season, really. So I just am not a fan of interleague play. I understand they're doing it for money, and maybe it's a good financial move, but for me as a baseball fan, yeah, I don't like that. And even DH for the National League, I'm still a traditionalist. I still think the pitcher should be up there batting. So I
Well,
never
look,
even. Uh,
I mean, Max Scherzer loved to hit. And if you
yeah,
remember the old Atlanta Braves teams, I mean, people like John Smoltz and things like
yeah,
that, they weren't bad hitters.
yeah, that's true.
You know, Madison Bumgarner was a good hitter.
Yeah,
He was a pretty good hitter. I mean, I think the pitchers weren't always an automatic out.
yeah,
And it created just an extra level of like, will the pitcher get it? Will he get on base? Sometimes they do, and
yeah,
sometimes that changes the whole calculus of the game. The
yeah,
DH, yeah, because then what happens too is that we're in this argument phase now about should a DH ever be elected to the Hall of Fame? The David Ortiz and others. will others like this come down the line that were
Yeah.
DHs? Shohei Ohtani doesn't play the field, except he might get in just because of the combination of skill and talent. The fact that he is a fabulous pitcher will probably propel him into the Hall of Fame at some point in time.
Yeah.
But the mentality of what constitutes a Hall of Fame ball player also changes if you have people who are nothing but DHs. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's a most DHs are one dimensional. They're there to hit.
Yes, true. Yeah.
And if Hall of Fame people, the players should be someone that usually if you judged on their hitting and their fielding, their base running, and just go look at everything all the way around, not just the fact that what they did at the plate. So
Yes.
so anyway, so we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. Yeah, I know when they run that roll of people who've died during the year,
Yeah.
you tend to forget some of the people did because it's 12 months, and the people who died earlier in the year, you just kind of lose memory, and you're like, wow, we lost a lot of good people.
Well, the one shocking one to me was Shannon Doherty.
Yeah,
Who,
she'd been battling cancer for a long
yeah,
time.
she was young though. I mean, she
Yeah,
was no older, probably young, no older than us. I mean, she was pretty young.
yeah. I mean, she'd had a rough go with the cancer, so it was.
Yeah.
I think that was unfortunately going to be inevitable, but she put up a tremendous fight against that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
cancer is evil.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I see it. It's hit my family. It's hit a
Mhm.
lot of other people I know. It is just horrific when that happens. So I have a lot of sympathy when that happens to people. Anything else in your?
I don't know. What did you think of? I mean, I maybe because I have a one-track mind, so it's usually politics. So that's why I would think of the biggest stories were political. Um, I don't know in sports. I don't know if you have any. I guess big stories there. I guess is it the year Caitlin Clark? I guess had a great year, right? Didn't she?
Yeah, she was a great year. So
Yeah.
I from the sports perspective, I put down the 12 team college football playoff
Okay. Yes, that's right.
because nobody knew how that was going to work. And so far, all the games we've seen have been duds.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
It's and so a lot of people are like, so why does this better, except for maybe the money and more teams playing, than the
Yeah.
4 team playoff, which people complained about because a couple teams got blown out last year, and so they were complaining about that. But we had some first round blowouts this time around. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that they found this formula. I would have my preference on college football, at least if they want to expand the playoff, just go to 8 and see how that works. Don't
Yeah.
go from 4 to 12
Yeah. That's true.
and throw in all these crazy rules that were confusing the heck out of people about who qualifies, who gets a bye based on whatever the conference they win. You know, pick your 8 best teams and let them go head to head. You know, the thing is, the problem with that is always is that no one's ever going to be satisfied. If you go to 8, team number 9 is going to say we should be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Same thing. You have 12 teams. Team number 13 is saying we should have been there. So my kids' alma mater. I mean, BYU had a good year, but they blew a
Mhm.
couple of games and they dropped out of the playoff picture. A larger playoff than 12 gets them in. How far they go, I have no clue. But
Yeah.
the more teams you have in the playoffs, the more games you got to play, the longer that season goes and deeper into because normally basically you finish up by New Year's. But
Yeah.
and they're not playing bowl games. The big bowl games played on New Year's, just before that, and you get to New Year's Day or whatever. And then the week after, the Monday after that is was kind of when the finals played. With this 12-team playoff, they've already had to start playing to get to that point. How many players are already, they've already played like 13 games. Now they got to play 3 or 4 more games to win the national championship. You're asking those college kids to play a lot more games than they're used to, and then they have a transfer portal issue, and which is which all takes place in December, and it creates a big muckety mess. So so that the other one for sports too was just Juan Soto's contract. Phenomenal.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I love Juan Soto, a great ball player. He's not a great fielder. He's not a great base runner, but he is so good at the plate. He's got the most discipline of any ball player, that's playing out there. But that contract is just mind blowing
Yeah.
because Steve Cohen basically said, "I'm backing up the truck. Give him you
Yeah.
want." I mean, they've got tickets to the ball game behind home plate as part of that. I think he's got access to a suite or something like that. He's got escalator costs, which actually his salary can go up because of inflation or something like that. I mean, things that are kind of unheard of in Major League Baseball. So this contract is it, it's already well worth more than what Otani signed for, but it could go even higher because of all these things that they're thrown in there.
It's good.
So
He Bidenomicsed his contract.
yeah,
Bidenomics. Prove it.
yeah, maybe that's it. All right, so we've actually hit the 1 hour mark, but I still think let's spend a couple more minutes at least
Oh,
talking
sure.
about
Yeah.
the other things. How about going back to politics, the pardons from Biden, pardoning Hunter, as
Yeah.
well as as well as all those people he pardoned, and the
Yeah.
commutation of those sentences for death row inmates. Thoughts?
Yeah. It might be a first for a president to pardon his son. You've had presidents pardon Roger Clinton, Bill Clinton pardoned his brother, and may have had that. But the other thing about it is the just pure dishonesty of it, because he said they asked him point blank a couple times at least, "Are you going to pardon your son?" And he said no. Now that was obviously a lie, but the reason he had to say that was because he wanted to run against Trump abusing the office. Well, Biden was going to abuse the office, but he couldn't say that. So, in fact, he couldn't even be coy about it. Like, well, make that decision when the time comes. No, he didn't say that. He had to bluntly just lie and say no. So it was, it was for political reasons that he lied. And I was struck by how broad the pardon was because it's not for a specific crime. It's any crime you might have committed in 14 years, any federal crime.
Yeah.
The only one that got something similar, I think, was Ford giving to Nixon. And you kind of understand that because Nixon was a president, former president. In the case of Hunter Biden, I don't know why he would deserve such a pardon, you know?
Well, so you see, right. So doesn't that raise the question too? It's like, what does Joe know that we don't know that Hunter did? That we just haven't found that they just haven't found out yet, right? So now Joe is basically, because you talked about corrupt family. Joe's going in there saying like, we're cleaning this up. We're just making sure he doesn't get indicted for anything. You're not pardoned for everything. That for this period of time, because this is when you mucked everything up. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yet another part of Biden's legacy, right?
Yeah, that's another part of the legacy, I think, because he'll be known for that, I think, and lying about it. The other thing is he could have just commuted the sentence, right? He could have said, well, I'm not overturning it, but you don't have to go to jail. So he could have done that, but yeah.
Yeah, and then he commuted all those death row inmates to
Except for 3.
Yeah, I was like, okay, well, you'll live out the rest of your life, for a lot of practical purposes, it doesn't make a lot of difference because the executions of death row inmates is pretty slow.
Yeah.
So I mean, but though under Trump, Trump, I think under Trump the first time around, I think they actually managed to kind of dig into some of those and get some of those done. But it is, I do think that the families get the short end of the stick here. That it's like there's a chance that that person who killed my loved one will actually pay the ultimate price, and be executed for that crime. And he took that off the table, except for just a handful of people.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was so that was an odd. I don't know why he did it. I guess because the left is against sort of virtue signaling they're against the death penalty.
Well,
But Biden, is
yeah,
that the
but-
reason? I mean, Biden historically has been in favor of it. At least he used to say he was in favor of it.
yeah. So what they're saying basically is that this is part of that Trump proofing, this whole thing by commuting their sentences, which can't be reversed, right?
Yeah.
He has now taken off the table any chance that Trump had to actually get those people executed. They thought there's maybe a chance that Trump will actually succeed and approve, these states will, execute these people. But now those people are off the table. This is a purely political move on the part of Biden and the Democrats to say, we're not going to allow, to give the Republicans a chance to find a way to execute these people. That's it. We're done. It's astonishing that they would do this to that many people like that. I mean, and the number of pardons the general pardons that he gave, what was it, like 1,500? I mean, they just kind of ranted up. I think somebody gave Joe a list and said, "Here's everybody we want you to pardon." It's like, fine, whatever. I'm leaving office. But that was a pretty high number, I thought.
I think he was probably just told. I don't think he reviewed any of the cases.
No.
I think he probably was just told.
Yeah.
To do it.
Yeah, I think that was it. As we wrap up, I'll mention just a couple other things to get your comments on. Well, Bitcoin, that was the big story this year because, really because of the election of Donald Trump, Bitcoin soared. I mean, it had a pretty good year up to the election point, but then after the election, it really took off. I mean, hitting like $108,000, where it had been, for earlier in the year, I think it had been in the 60s. And I don't know where it started the year, but it had a tremendous year. And if you were an early investor when Bitcoin first started, whenever that was, I think Bitcoin first came out at like $5 for Bitcoin.
Well, I didn't get on that train. I never understood the cryptocurrency. I never understood any of it. I didn't get involved in that.
It's complicated because you have these people mine the Bitcoin, right? They create the Bitcoin. There is a finite number of Bitcoin that can be mined at some point in time. There will be no more Bitcoin being mined. So you'll have, that was it. You're going to have whatever the number is. That's all the Bitcoin you will have to trade and to use. But they are stored in these digital wallets. So I listened to a guy on a tech podcast, and he has 7 Bitcoin, I think it was, but he has one problem. He forgot the password to his Bitcoin wallet. And it's not as easy as, I forgot it. Can you reset it? Because there's like no master, control of the Bitcoin. I mean, you can store it anywhere. I mean, we had that whole Mount Grok thing a few years ago where people stored Bitcoin, and then this whole Mount Grok stored, they blew up, and everybody who had Bitcoin in there lost all their Bitcoin money.
Wow.
So, but I think they give you like up to 10 attempts, and after 10 attempts, you're completely locked out of your Bitcoin. So I think he's done like 5. You can pay people, who would take a commission to try to crack the code to get into your wallet, and you're just kind of like, is it worth? Well, now his Bitcoin is worth over $700,000. He might want to think about that. When it was at $30,000, he's like, 200, and all this stuff. But $700,000. Now it is one of those things it is a taxable currency. The IRS now has put its fingers in there and says, you trade Bitcoin, we're getting our cut. Whereas people tried to use this as an underground currency before. But there's so many types of crypto out there, it'll make your head spin. So I stay away from it.
I just don't know enough about it to invest. So I don't.
Look, the thing is if you can go to a gas station and see a Bitcoin ATM, and you're like, okay. It's like, true. You cannot go to a gas station and buy a share of Apple. But you can go to a gas station and buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. I'm like, what is wrong with this picture? All right. So, and then the last 2 things I want to just get your brief comments on. kind of really what I consider the implosion of the EV market, car market.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that has not gone well at all for EV makers in general.
Yeah. Well, they were pushed on people, and it's like you're not letting the free market decide, and it's politically correct to push EVs. I have nothing against them. I'm just not sure that they really work, or at least are that going to be that reliable. And so it's a lot of money. I mean, I couldn't afford an electric car. And then there's the questions about the charging. There's questions about the battery. There's questions about the environment in terms of the minerals, materials to do it. So I never thought it was quite yet at the point where we could say this is the wave of the future. This is it. And I think there's going to be something other than, and you and Dwight know far more about cars than I do, but I don't think it is. I think there's something out there. Maybe it's fuel cell technology, or there's something else I think that's going to take over. It's not going to be electric.
Okay, so Dwight's big thing there is hydrogen, right?
Okay. Okay.
He's big on hydrogen, but hydrogen is hard. I mean, that is expensive. It is,
All right.
they have not figured out the technology how to make that go yet and
Okay.
everything like that. But maybe in 20 years they'll figure a way to harness that to make it cost effective. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
What
and
about
things
fuel
like
cell
that.
technology they talk about?
Yeah.
Is that hydrogen? If I say fuel cell technology.
Yeah, yes, that can be that, I think too. Yeah. I mean, so if you go to, when you I haven't been to Japan and Korea for almost 20 years now, but I was I marveled at the fact that a lot of the cars, the taxis there, you know, ran on basically kind of propane and natural gas kind of things like that. The
Mm,
taxis had a tank in their trunk
okay.
and would just do that. So that's a clean burning fuel to do that.
Yeah.
And in a compact area, it kind of made sense. And that was well before the EV revolution as such. Because I mean, China now makes a ton of EVs, which has crimped the Americans car makers on like, oh well, we can do this. Of course, if you're in California, as it stands, you still won't be able to buy a car, a gas powered car after 2035. I'm like,
Mm,
"Eh, another reason to leave California.
yeah, I agree.
It's
Yeah.
like you're telling people we have to buy an EV. It's like what kind of nonsense is that? I mean, what is popular kind of to relieve the anxiety of the range anxiety or plug-in EVs, so that they have a chance to the kind of hybrid where you can use the electric part of it or you can use a gas part of it, right? The hybrids and things like that are popular because it's like if I run my EV battery down, my electric battery down, I can still put gas in the car and get somewhere
Yeah.
and then get it charged or whatever.
Yeah.
So hybrids have done pretty well lately, but
Yeah.
these car makers are losing tons of money, especially these new companies, Lucid and Rivian and stuff like that. They have some cool looking cars, but
Yeah.
when you're losing $50,000 for every car you sell, how
Yeah.
long how long can you last?
That's true. But do
Yeah.
you think have we seen anything on the prices? Prices coming down because if they're sitting in the lot, I'm assuming.
Well, what the Biden administration did though was that they threw in all, they revived the tax credits and extended them to used cars and a bunch of other things for EVs. So that's $7,500, up to $7,500 to try to juice the sales, which
Yeah.
it did a little bit, but it's still, I mean, the difference between like a new EV and a new car can be 15 or $20,000. And so, that's the other part of the problem is that you're telling people that they're going to have to spend $60,000 maybe or more on an EV where they could have bought a new car off the dealer lot for 40. There's some EVs that are, in the used market, but they're still going to be more expensive than the used cars.
Yeah.
So, you're forcing people. I just don't know how. I just don't see how California can make that work.
Yeah. The only thing I
Where
can
you
think of is unless they suspend that or have some legal legislative measure to suspend it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, one of the acts, by the Biden administration EPA is that they gave the California, regulatory board that oversees all this stuff permission to set their own rules about emission standards in California, and that's
Okay.
part of it. And
All
I'm
right.
like, it's like, okay, you're just letting California be California.
And
So,
Virginia follows along because Ralph Northam and the Democrats, when they controlled the Virginia legislature, they went along with it.
and Maryland would usually used to do a lot of that, but I think even Maryland sometimes on some of these things say like, that's kind of the bridge too far. We can't
All right,
go there.
good. Well,
We
good for
can't go
well,
there.
good for Maryland on that one.
Yeah. And then finally is artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
the rise of artificial intelligence. This has been, uh, I mean, my head is spinning about all the different AI opportunities. I mean, places you can go. I mean, Microsoft's got a part into OpenAI, I think it is, and Google's got Gemini, and now has Apple Intelligence, and they're just there's Chat GPT, so things that a lot of people are using to to kind of draft articles, do a lot of different things. Um, you can make a podcast using artificial intelligence. One of the podcasts I listen to, the guy's been having he does it on tech, but he's had some illness and that's kind of taken away his voice has been really raspy.
Hmm.
So at one point in time, he one of the it was last week, he said, okay, that's it. It's only about a 20-minute podcast. I think about halfway through, he told the listeners, he says, I'm now turning this over to the AI voice. And so
Wow.
he had trained the AI in his voice, which wasn't terrible. And
Yeah.
it basically did the rest of the script for the rest of the show. But yeah, I mean, that is the future, I think, is that you just see AI, but is it a good thing? How
I'm
much
s-
how
uh,
many bad things are there? I mean, I just saw a thing in the journal about how scammers are using AI,
yeah,
uh, to scam people on the credit cards and
yeah,
stuff like that. And
yeah.
so,
Count me as a tech skeptic. But
yeah,
hopefully Dwight's still not watching the show because if he hears about AI doing the show, I mean, we're gone.
yeah. Yeah,
But
when I can't be there, I'll just train AI to fill in for me.
you know what though? One of the problems I have with it is sometimes I'll watch like little documentaries on YouTube, and I can tell it was done by AI because the pictures don't match up with what they're saying. Have you ever seen that?
I
It's
haven't
on.
seen
It's
that
a
yet.
little clip.
No.
Yeah, and and I assume it's AI because it doesn't quite match up. It's not like a person did that. So the video and the narration doesn't seem to match up, and I always assumed that was an AI thing.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. I mean, my wife was saying today through our drive home, she was talking about a meme about the Cybertruck, and she says, "I don't know if it's real or if it's AI," and she just
Yeah,
described it to me. It's like I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But this is another thing. I mean, you can do a lot with Photoshop anyway, but
yeah,
AI basically ups the ante on things to create more fakery, in our
yeah,
system. So I think there's a good use of AI in places, but it is, I mean, look at colleges, universities. I mean, how many kids are going to be using AI to try to get papers written, you
yeah.
know, which is going to force the professors to do other things here. What is he here? Is it
That's true. That's a way of cheating. So I'm not a fan. So
like the Bruce Lee movies?
uh,
All right, everybody. All right, I think is that enough? Have we've gone way over, and I normally would never do this when Dwight's away, so I'm
yeah.
holding the Dwight tradition. But I think we had a lot of things to cover, and we covered a lot of
Oh,
interesting stories
no, it
tonight.
was good. It was good talking those things, and well, I look forward to a good 2025, both for the nation and for us. So fingers crossed, we'll be okay. It should be a good year, but yeah, there are a lot of things that are nerve wracking. Some things causing angst, but hopefully we get Trump. Everything turns out good. He starts off strong, and I think we'll have a good year.
Yeah, I think so too. So are you a New Year's reveler? Do you do anything particular or just
No, no, I won't do anything really. My ex and I, she was from the Philippines, so she always had all these traditions the Filipinos have, and that would have been even in the meal on New Year's night. You have certain dishes that she would have, and there's certain traditions, but I didn't carry those out so anymore. So nothing really.
so your ex was a Filipino? It's like I
Yeah.
have because my daughter-in-law is Filipina. It's like
Okay.
I've become much more interested in the Filipino culture and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
so I've got a Jap. My mother was Japanese, my wife is Korean, my daughter-in-law is Filipino. It's like I'm really getting the Asian experience, right?
Yeah.
And so my wife learned to cook some pancit and some other things, and she wants to
Oh
learn
yeah.
how to do some other things like that too.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and we had a friend of ours who's Filipino, and he came over one time and he brought adobo.
Oh yeah.
So some of the
I
more
had all
traditional.
that. Well, other than one, I'm a big fan of all of them. Really, all the Filipinos. So,
So yeah, and I've got another friend of mine, and she's on Facebook a lot, and it's it's filled. She takes a gazillion pictures, and a lot of it's about Filipino food.
oh, great food. Yeah, it's great food. Because the thing about the Philippines is it was a perfect mix between the Spanish influence, you have the Asian influence, and so that's where it all got mixed in there pretty good. So
All right, that was a good reminder from Craig about Pizza and Politics on Mama Lucia's on January 2nd. That's something that Dwight would do if he was here, and everything like that. But yeah, I won't be. The older I get, the more fuddy-duddy I get about New Year's. So it's.
yeah, my father used to say that's just a bunch of drunks on the road too. So you got to be careful. So
I
don't
mean,
go.
look, I remember as a kid, we'd stay up, we'd watch the ball drop, we'd watch, Guy Lombardo singing all, in the band doing Auld Lang Syne, and then
Yeah,
my mom would say, okay, now take a pot in the pan and bang it or whatever, you know,
yeah,
couldn't do fireworks in
yeah.
Montgomery County or anything like that. Though a lot of people still do that illegally
Oh
anyway.
yeah, I'm sure they do.
And it's like, the older guy, I'm like, okay, why am I staying up to midnight for this? It's like, what is the purpose? It's like, I'm
Yeah,
usually in bed by 9. That's it.
yeah,
We'll be with some church friends and their little children, and we'll probably leave their house by 7 o'clock, and then
yeah.
it'll pretty much be the end of our night. So it's maybe I'm missing out on something, but I
No,
think I'm
you're
okay.
not really. No, it's annoying, really. And then you're there for Jenny McCarthy's show, and I remember Dick Clark used to ring in the New Year. Dick Clark was good when he
Yeah,
would do it. I would watch
yeah.
that.
So, all right, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for sticking with us. Hope you enjoyed the show and our discussion about the Biden clan and the top stories of 2024. Maybe we can repeat this again next year at the same time. Yeah, rocking. Yeah, here we go. This is what it was, right? The Dick Clark thing, right?
Yeah,
Rocking
that's
New
right.
Year's Eve.
Rocking New Year's Eve or whatever. Rocking in the New Year.
I will. What? So the last thing I'll say though, just because is that I don't know if you saw this story, but they're replacing the crystals on the ball in
Mm,
Times Square. And so what they did was that they got a bunch of people, I don't know exactly know how they chose them. I didn't hear the whole story, to come and volunteer to help replace the crystals.
hmm
And by doing so, with the crystal they replaced, they got to
Yeah.
keep the one they replaced.
Hmm.
And that's real crystal. And
Oh, wow.
the crystals that were in the time in that ball actually have a date on them.
Hmm.
So they're actually dated for the time they were actually installed into the ball.
Hmm.
But they have to every once in a while apparently replace that. And they decided, hey, look, it's easier just to get a bunch of people to come in there and pull one out and put one in, or however the process works, and we give them a souvenir from that ball,
Hmm.
and then we get it done. Boom.
That's good.
Yeah, that is absolutely cool. I'm thinking, like, if I'd known about that, I would have been there in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Well,
That just sounds like what
you'd never see me in Times Square on New Year's Eve. Even when I watch those people out there, I think that does not look fun because you're going to be standing there all evening,
For a long
every
time.
night.
I heard a guy being interviewed about lining up early. Is like, he wears the pens.
Yes, God help you if you have any prostate
And,
issues.
and I'm thinking like, oh man, I never even thought about that. It's like, this is just like, oh my gosh.
That's carrying it way too far. Don't even go.
Yeah. Seriously. Just watch it on the boob tube. You're just
Oh
better
yeah,
off. And you
yeah,
stay warmer. You can watch it in your
absolutely.
home and all that. All right. As I was saying, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for joining us this year. We really appreciate your support and everything. David, thanks for a great year of being with us on Dr. Politics. As
Yeah.
you said, looking forward to a great 2025. So happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to anybody out there watching that will be watching us. And with that, it is a wrap for 2024, and we will see you in 2025.
Happy New Year.